Hello. Welcome to my series of talks on the topic, What is Religion? In 1966, the anthropologist Anthony F.C. Wallace predicted the future of religion is extinction. Well, after over 50 years of religious non-extinction, Wallace's forecast is beginning to look shaky, rather like the end times predictions of the apocalypse. Now, Wallace was undoubtedly thinking of religion in terms of what he was familiar with, namely, the supernaturalistic belief systems found in nearly all traditional cultures. Today, a more sophisticated conception of religion would probably warn him away from any such forecast. What has been extinguished is the complete domination of cultures by pre-modern faith systems associated with the familiar names Hinduism, Buddhism, Christianity, Judaism, and Islam. Modern science and philosophy have given rise to a strong secular movement in all the world's advanced societies, along with a backlash against it in the form of culture wars. Meanwhile, violent sectarian wars continue to repeat history. There is no reason to believe religion is going down for the count anytime soon. Actually, I would argue, not ever. For religion properly understood, as we shall see, is the human response to our ultimate concerns, and those are inseparable from human life itself. As the academic study of world religions progressed into the 20th century, it became increasingly clear that the original names Western scholars had used for distinguishing religions from one another, Christianity, Hinduism, Shinto, etc., were no longer adequate for understanding the rich complexity of religious expressions in the various cultures of the world. Hinduism, for example, is no longer thought to be a single religion, but rather a family of religious types that differ from one another in certain important ways. In Hinduism today, we find magical religion, polytheistic and monotheistic faith systems, and esoteric mystical spirituality, all coexisting in the sprawling Hindu religious landscape. The same is true of Buddhism, Christianity, and all the other major traditions. Clearly, a different way of thinking about religious phenomena was called for. This series of talks is an inquiry into whether there is a best way to think about the world's religions, or whether we must settle for a variety of approaches that cannot be reconciled with one another. The key to the discussion is a search for a definition of religion that will serve us better than those used in the past and those in current use. So what is religion anyway? It is useful in this inquiry to distinguish traditional, modern, and postmodern approaches to investigations of religious systems. Traditionalists tend to reflect a bias in favor of their own religious perspective, and so they look for features of their own religion, Christianity, for example, that might be present in other traditions. The extreme view of this bias is that religion just is my religion. All other faiths are false, and similar sectarian biases can be found in the other major traditions. Modernist scholars, by contrast, take an objective point of view with the aim of making the study of religion scientific. Now, while vastly increasing our knowledge of the world's religions, the scientific approach too often tends to reduce religion to psychological, historical, cultural, or even physical factors as revealed by neuroscience. Examples of modernist views are Freud's dictum, religion is a psychological illusion, and this from Karl Marx, religion is the opiate of the people. Less visible, but gaining influence over the last few decades, is a postmodern reaction to the narrowness and intolerance of traditionalist and modernist interpretations of religion. A postmodern perspective is grounded in an empathic and sensitive response to the lives of others despite their profound differences from one's own. As Professor Frederick Strang of Southern Methodist University writes, in a quite different kind of response to religious pluralism, a person recognizes that other human beings are as moral, devout, intelligent, and religiously sensitive as oneself. Despite different religious views, other people are equally able to find happiness and peace and to perceive profound meaning in life. Why not participate in the joys and freedom witnessed to by a different religious option? Postmodern scholars of religion, dissatisfied with traditionalist and modernist definitions, have searched for a more inclusive, value-neutral approach. For example, in his course Cultural Literacy for Religion, Professor Mark Berkson considers 3 different types of definition used today by scholars of religion. First, a substantive definition identifies a single feature as the essence of religion and uses that to distinguish religious phenomena from one another and from non-religious phenomena. One such substantive definition is supernaturalism. Religion is belief in supernatural beings and embrace of ritual practices aimed at connecting people with those beings. Another type of definition is functional. This approach sees religion as cultural and social systems providing answers and meanings to communities of people who are bound together by a common set of beliefs and practices. All such definitions seem too narrow to postmodern scholars. Berkson prefers what he calls a family resemblance type of definition, in which a list or cluster of characteristics commonly associated with religion are used to compare the various traditions. Professor Ninian Smart's widely cited 7 dimensions of religion is an example of this type. So the first of these 7 dimensions is called the ritual dimension. It consists of private or public forms of prayer and sacred ceremonies. Next, the narrative and mythic dimension is comprised of creation stories and stories about gods and goddesses and how they interact with humans. Sometimes mythic narratives fit together into a fairly complete and systematic interpretation of the universe and humans' place in it. Next is the experiential and emotional dimension. Private individual experiences of dread, guilt, awe, mystery, devotion, liberation, ecstasy, inner peace, and bliss. The social and institutional dimension consists of rules for identifying community membership and participation, usually administered by a priestly caste or class or a charismatic leader. Next, the ethical and legal dimension consists of rules about human behavior, often regarded as revealed from a supernatural realm. The 10 Commandments would be an example of this. The doctrinal and philosophical dimension is the philosophical, systematic formulation of religious teachings in an intellectually coherent form. And finally, the material dimension is that collection of ordinary objects, places, and buildings that symbolize or manifest the sacred realm. Now, the family resemblance approach looks promising. Rather than defining religion in terms of a single, narrow, common feature or function, we are invited to consult a checklist of characteristics that the best-known traditions exhibit and say that any phenomenon that has those characteristics is a religion. The checklist approach includes substantive and functional aspects and its flexibility prevents it from being either too narrow or too broad. However, there is a problem if the claim is made that all 7 dimensions are necessary conditions for some activity to be called religious. Zen Buddhism, for example, has no system of religious teachings in an intellectually coherent form. Again, a solitary yogin meditating in a cave has no use for ritual, doctrine, organization, or symbolic objects. Confucianism does not offer much in the way of narrative or myth. And yet all of these are commonly recognized as religions or forms of religious life. So it appears that some important religions will have some, but not all of the characteristics in the list. How many are required? Which of the 7 are the most important? And what if the list is inaccurate? Another system posits 12 defining characteristics. So the family resemblance approach has a lot of appeal, but is ultimately unsatisfying. It lacks the simplicity and elegance we would like to have for a proper theory of religion. My philosophical instinct is to look for a higher level definition that will unify the various lists into a single concise conception of the fundamental nature of religious life. Now, sometimes in cases like this, it helps to reformulate the question. Taking a hint from functionalism, suppose we ask a person of faith, "What is your religion for?" I think religion is not something that happens to people. It is something that they do. It's a purposeful activity, so we can ask, well, what's this activity for? If this is correct, we can ask whether there is a common purpose that religious people share, while the specific forms of their religious pursuits in search of that purpose may be many and varied. Many years ago, I stumbled upon an answer to this question that has served me well ever since. Although it seems to have been dropped from academic discussions about religion in the ensuing years. The definition was proposed by a widely admired professor of religious studies at Southern Methodist University, Dr. Frederick J. String, whom I've mentioned already. In his book, Understanding Religious Life, String proposed the following definition: religion is a means toward ultimate transformation. In my next talk, I will discuss this idea in detail.